Okay, this screencast has to do with what we call neural networks, and they're very important in terms of understanding the brain and understanding, again, how that our behavior is impacted by the brain and maybe by changes within the brain. So again, I'm going to start with a slide that technically this is from a different screencast that we've already done, but basically the key concept to remember: any change in the behavior, or I'm sorry, any change in the structure or the chemistry of the brain will result in a change in behavior. So the whole idea is to understand that the brain does go through changes. Even as people are old, the older you are, it doesn't matter. Your brain is still physically changing throughout your entire lifetime. So now, when you're younger, your brain tends to change more frequently and more easily, so especially during the developmental process. What we're going to talk about real quick is neural networks. We know that the brain is made up of billions and billions of neurons, okay? And so what we're talking about are a variety of neurons that are kind of linked together or put together that allow us to kind of encode or remember various memories or to perform physical activities, anything along those lines. So when we are growing as a child, we have a variety of experiences, and those experiences create these neural networks. Think of it this way. Think of the brain as almost being like a chalkboard, and every experience that you have in life, you're drawing a new picture on the chalkboard, or you're writing a new word, or you're creating a new line on that chalkboard, and it just continues throughout your entire life. Now, these are physical changes that are actually taking place in the brain. And again, the younger you are, the more receptive your brain is to these physical changes. But it doesn't mean that these things can't occur as you get older as well. But let's take a look at a few things. For example, languages. Most people, if they wait to learn a foreign language until they're in high school, or worse yet, maybe in college, or let's say that an adult decides, hey, I'm going to go visit a foreign location, and so then they start trying to learn a language. It's very difficult. It's extremely difficult the older you are to learn a new language. But yet, little kids, 2, 3, 4 years old, they pick up new languages just, I mean, easily, extremely easy. That's because basically we talk about it as a critical time period. A critical time period is a time period when something's most easily learned. So, like language, the critical time period for learning a language is typically thought of to be between the ages of 2 and 12. So you have kind of about a 10-year window when it's relatively easy, extremely easy, for people to learn a language. And why is that? Well, our brain is more receptive. It's almost programmed, pre-programmed, and ready to accept language. So, therefore, kids in Europe, it's nothing for those kids to learn 3, 4, 5 different languages, all by the time they're 7, 8, 9 years old, and they can be extremely fluent in those languages. In America, we've never emphasized that, and we tend to delay teaching the foreign languages, so therefore it just makes it tougher to really learn a language and become fluent at it. Playing music, playing sports, doing a variety of other things. Really, the younger that you begin with those types of things, the easier that it's going to be able to that you're going to be able to make those marks on the chalkboard, or in other words, create those neural networks within the brain. Okay, because each time you do these things, you're creating little grooves or little indentations or ruts or programs, whatever you want to call them, into the brain. And practice reinforces those neural networks. Okay, so whether it be learning a language and then practicing that language over and over and over again, or whether it be sports or music, um, if you learn a particular sporting routine, or a dance or anything along those lines, if you continue to practice it over and over and over again, it becomes so much easier because it's literally programmed into the brain. And this brings up a concept that a lot of people don't know about, but it's called long-term potentiation. Long-term potentiation refers to things that have been ingrained in us over a time period. For example, learning to throw a baseball or learning to throw a football. Those are things that kids learn when they're little, and it's been ingrained in them. Now, coaches, if you think back to your experiences in Little League or soccer, whatever it is, coaches always talk about the fundamentals, that you need to learn how to do these things the right way. And you need to learn them at a very young age. The reason is because, again, you're creating those neural networks. It's almost like sometimes coaches refer to it as muscle memory. Well, again, it's kind of like a brain memory. Okay, these neural networks are being created in your brain. And if you learn the proper way to do it when you're young, then it just becomes easier to continue to do that when you're older. Now, on the other hand, if you learn to throw a baseball and you learn an improper technique and you continue that technique, by the time you're 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, and then you go back and somebody tries to teach you the proper way to throw a baseball, it's going to be extremely difficult to change because your brain's already programmed that way. And as soon as you pick up a baseball and as soon as you start the motion of throwing the baseball, your brain is automatically going to try and do it the exact same way that it's previously known how to do it. So therefore, it's extremely difficult to change. Now, that brings us to the whole idea of like cognitive therapies. Okay, cognitive, you remember, is thinking. Let's take a look at that real quick. I know we're kind of a ways away from that in terms of our the content, and we're not going to be covering cognitive therapies until much later in the course. But when you think about it, a cognitive therapy is just trying to reprogram the way a person thinks. So, for example, if a person tends to be a pessimist, and they're always looking at the negative side of things, and they're always focused on the negative, cognitive therapies will attempt to try and get a person to kind of look at the other view, or to kind of change the way they think about various things. That's what cognitive therapies are attempting to do. It's not always an easy thing to do because, again, if you've been programmed over the years to think a certain way, it's going to be kind of difficult. And that brings us to one other thing, and one last thing that we'll look at in this, and that is, how adaptable is our brain. When we talk about what's called brain plasticity, we're talking about the ability for our brain to actually kind of form new connections or to repair itself after it's been damaged. And the younger you are, the more plastic or adaptable that your brain is. When you're less than 10 years old, you've got a really good chance. Your brain has a really good chance of kind of adapting, and maybe other areas of the brain taking over various functions and things of that nature. The older you get, the tougher it gets. because literally when you're talking about changing all of these things in the brain, you're talking about creating new neural networks, and those things again tend to be developed early in life. So we talked about those critical time periods. um, One last thing, the neural networks that are not used will eventually die out. It's kind of that old adage, you better use it or you will lose it. So there are various things in your brain. If you, for example, myself, I have not done trigonometry for many, many years. Yes, I used to be able to do it. Today, I wouldn't have a clue because I haven't used it in many, many years. So, all of those memories, all of that ability has pretty much been lost. Okay? That's the whole concept of neural networks is those being able to basically kind of form or ingrain things into the brain.